I never liked closing shifts at Target, but someone had to do it. The store felt different at night, too quiet, too empty. During the day, it was filled with families, kids running around, and people pushing red shopping carts. But past midnight, the place turned into something else. The bright lights didn't feel comforting anymore. They just made the empty aisles look longer. It was 12:30 a.m., and I was the last one inside, finishing up the last security check before locking the doors. My manager had already left, and the cleaning crew had finished an hour ago. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. The cameras showed nothing unusual, just rows of empty aisles, perfectly still. I glanced at the monitor one last time before shutting it off. That's when I saw her. A woman in a red hoodie stood in the frozen food section. My heart skipped a beat. I was sure I had checked that area just minutes ago, and it had been empty. I leaned closer to the screen trying to see her face, but her hood was pulled too low. She wasn't moving, just standing there. I grabbed my flashlight and hurried toward the aisle. If she had been locked inside by mistake, I needed to let her out. But when I turned the corner, the aisle was empty. The freezers hummed softly, and the glass doors reflected my confused face. There was no sign of her. I checked every aisle, every corner of the store. Nothing. Maybe the camera had glitched. Maybe my tired brain was playing tricks on me. Shaking my head, I locked the doors and stepped outside. The cold air felt good, waking me up a little. I drove home, convincing myself it was just a mistake. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Because when I reviewed the footage the next morning, she was still there, standing in the same spot, and she hadn't moved all night. I stared at the screen, my hands cold against the desk. The security footage played in black and white, the timestamp ticking away the hours. 12:45 a.m. The woman in the red hoodie stood in the same spot, not moving. 1:30 a.m., still there. 3:15 a.m., no change. 5 a.m. My stomach tightened. She hadn't shifted an inch. No normal person could stand that still for that long. I leaned in, studying the footage closely. Her arms were at her sides, her hood covering most of her face. But then I noticed something even worse. At 6 a.m., right before the store reopened, she finally moved. But she didn't walk away. She turned her head, slowly, directly toward the camera. And even though the footage was grainy, I could see it clearly. She was smiling. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart racing. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe there was some glitch in the footage. But deep down, I knew neither of those things were true. I needed to go back to work. I needed to check the store. I needed to find out who she was. When I got to work, the store was already busy. I walked in, trying to act normal, but my eyes kept scanning the aisles. She had to be here somewhere. I checked the frozen food section first. Nothing. Just regular shoppers picking out bags of vegetables and frozen pizza. I felt stupid. Maybe I had overreacted. But then, near the self-checkout, I saw it. A red hoodie. My breath caught in my throat as I walked closer. A woman was standing in line, her hood up, her face hidden. I hesitated, but I had to know. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Were you here last night?" She didn't answer. She just stepped forward in line, as if she hadn't heard me. I reached out, gently tapping her shoulder. "Ma'am." She turned around, and it wasn't her. A teenager, earbuds in, gave me a confused look. Can I help you?" I stepped back, shaking my head. "Sorry. Thought you were someone else." I felt like an idiot. What was I even looking for? A ghost? Some kind of shadow person? I was losing it. But then, as I walked back toward the security office, I noticed something. The store had been open for an hour now. Employees had walked through every aisle. Customers were all around. But the exact spot where the woman had stood all night, no one had walked through it. As if they couldn't see it, I had to tell someone. I found my coworker Kevin near the electronics section. "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice low. "Have you ever seen anything weird here?" Kevin laughed. Dude, it's Target. The weirdest thing I see is customers arguing over a 10-cent discount. I swallowed hard. No, I mean, have you ever seen someone here when they shouldn't be? Kevin's smile faded a little. Why? I hesitated. I couldn't just blurt out, I think I saw a ghost on the security cameras. But before I could answer, a voice interrupted us. Henderson. A whisper. Right behind me. I spun around. No one was there. Kevin frowned. Dude, you okay? I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Yeah, just tired. But I wasn't okay, because I knew what I heard. And I knew who had whispered my name. I had to work another closing shift that night. I almost called in sick, but I needed answers. Midnight came. I sat in the security office watching the cameras. 12:30 a.m. I held my breath. And then, she was there, standing in the exact same spot. My hands clenched the desk. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't crazy. I had to see for myself. I walked toward the frozen food aisle, every step feeling heavier. The air felt wrong, like the store itself was holding its breath. And then, I saw her, the woman in the red hoodie. She stood motionless. Her face was hidden, but I could feel her watching me. Who are you? I whispered. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her face was pale, her eyes were hollow, and her smile was too wide. Still here, she whispered. The lights flickered. I stumbled back, and when the lights came back on, she was gone. The next morning, I checked the footage. She was there. She had watched me the whole time, and as I locked up that night, I saw something in the reflection of the glass doors. A red hoodie, standing behind me. I ran. I don't close the store alone anymore. And I never, ever check the cameras after midnight. I never thought working at Target would be scary. It was just a job, nothing more. I needed the money, and the early morning shifts fit my schedule. The store was quiet at 5 a.m., almost peaceful. No customers, no long lines, just employees setting up before the doors opened. It seemed perfect. My manager, Lisa, walked me through my first shift. She was nice but strict, always making sure things were done on time. She gave me a list of tasks and told me to focus on restocking the toy section. I walked through the empty aisles, pushing a cart filled with boxes. The store felt different in the early hours. The shelves looked taller, the lights seemed dimmer, and every little sound echoed. I tried to ignore it and focused on my work. As I reached the toy section, I noticed someone already there. A man in a Target uniform stacking shelves. I hadn't seen him when I walked in, but I figured he was just another employee. Hey, I called, not wanting to startle him. He didn't react. He just kept stacking toys, moving in a slow, steady rhythm. His uniform looked old, like it hadn't been washed in a while. I stepped closer. Did Lisa send you here too? No response. Something about him felt off, but I shook it off. Maybe he was just tired. I went to another aisle and started unpacking boxes, keeping an eye on him. A few minutes passed. When I looked back, he was gone. I frowned. He hadn't walked past me. The only way out was behind me, and I hadn't heard any footsteps. I walked to where he had been standing. The shelves were neatly stocked, but the boxes around him were still sealed. Something about that didn't feel right. I found Lisa in the break room checking her clipboard. Hey, who else is working toys today? I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up, confused. No one. You're the only one assigned there this morning. I hesitated. Are you sure? Because I just saw a guy stocking shelves. Older uniform, kind of. Before I could finish, her face changed. Her hands tightened around the clipboard. Where? She asked, her voice quieter than before. Toy section, I said. He was just there a minute ago. Lisa took a slow breath, like she was trying to stay calm. Henry, there's no one else working that area. I frowned. Maybe he's new? I didn't get his name, but she shook her head. That's impossible. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Why? Lisa put her clipboard down. Because if you saw someone in a Target uniform stacking shelves in toys, she paused. That means you just saw Daniel. I stared at her. Who's Daniel? She hesitated before answering. An employee who worked here 5 years ago. She swallowed hard. Until he died, right in that section. I laughed nervously. You're messing with me, right? Lisa didn't smile. I wish I was. The break room felt smaller, the air heavier. Lisa glanced at the clock, then back at me. You need to understand something. This store has history. I shifted uncomfortably. What happened to him? She hesitated again. Daniel was one of our best employees. He worked the early shift, just like you. One morning, he was restocking shelves in the toy section. No one saw exactly what happened, but they found him lying on the floor. I felt a chill. How did he die? Lisa lowered her voice. They said it was an accident. A shelf collapsed on him. But, she exhaled. Some people say he didn't die right away. That he was still breathing when they found him, trying to speak. I swallowed. What did he say? Lisa's expression darkened. No one knows. But whatever it was, it scared the people who heard it. A silence stretched between us. I forced a laugh. Okay, so you're saying I saw a ghost? Lisa didn't answer. And that scared me more than anything. I tried to shake it off, but the thought of Daniel wouldn't leave my mind. I finished my shift in silence, avoiding the toy section. But as I was clocking out, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps. I turned around. The store was empty except for a few employees, but the footsteps didn't belong to any of them. They were coming from the toy section. I told myself to leave. Go home. Forget about it. But I couldn't. I followed the sound, my heart pounding. The lights above flickered as I stepped into the aisle. It was empty, just rows of toys and shelves. Then I saw it. A name tag. It was lying on the floor, right where Daniel had been standing. I picked it up, my hands shaking. The plastic was old, scratched, the letters faded, but the name was still clear. Daniel. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about the name tag, the way Lisa reacted, the empty toy section. The next morning I arrived early. The store was still closed, the lights dim. I had to know. I walked straight to the toy section. My footsteps echoed in the empty aisles. Everything looked normal. Then I felt it, a presence, like someone was watching me. I turned around, my breath caught in my throat. A shadow moved between the shelves. I took a step back. Daniel? I whispered, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. The shadow stopped. Then slowly it moved toward me. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The shadow shifted, and for a second I saw him. Daniel. His uniform was dusty, his face pale. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. A chill ran through me. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. A single word, written in the dust on the shelf. Help. I went straight to Lisa. I told her everything. The name tag, the shadow, the word in the dust. She listened quietly, then nodded. You're not the first to see him, she admitted. He's still here. I shuddered. What does he want? Lisa hesitated. Maybe he wants someone to know the truth. I stared at her. The truth about what? Lisa looked away. Maybe it wasn't an accident. I left the store that day with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Daniel wasn't just a ghost, he was waiting. And he wasn't going anywhere. Working at Target was never part of my plan, but I needed a job and they were hiring. The night shifts weren't too bad, just long hours of stocking shelves and keeping an eye on security cameras. The store felt different at night, quieter, emptier, like it was holding its breath. I didn't mind it at first. It was a slow evening. The store would close soon, and I was in the security office, sipping stale coffee and watching the monitors. The screens showed different parts of the store, the aisles, the registers, the entrance. Nothing unusual. Then I saw him, a man in the electronics section. He stood near the TVs facing the security camera. His head was tilted slightly, his lips stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. I frowned. I hadn't seen him walk in. I checked the time, 8:30 p.m. The store was still open, but that section had been empty all night. He just stood there, staring. I switched cameras to get a different angle, but when I looked back, he was gone. I sat up, my heartbeat quickening. He hadn't walked away. The camera had flickered for a second, and then he wasn't there anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and left the office. I had to check for myself. The electronics section was silent. The TVs flickered, playing random ads. I walked between the aisles, looking around. No one. I turned back toward the security office, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe the camera had glitched. But when I reviewed the footage later, my stomach dropped. Because when I had walked away, the man had appeared again. And this time, he was looking directly into the camera. I rewound the footage, my hands shaking slightly. The man's face filled the screen. He stood motionless, his eyes too wide, his grin too big. His teeth were visible. Too many teeth. Then he moved. Not like a normal person. There was no walking motion, no steps. He just shifted like a flickering image. 1 second he was far away. The next, closer. I checked the timestamps. There was no missing footage, no jump cut. He was just suddenly there. And then I noticed something worse. When I had left the electronics section, the camera showed him standing behind me. Right behind me. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold sweat on my back. That wasn't possible. I hadn't seen anyone there. I had felt alone. The screen flickered again. For a split second I saw something strange. A distorted face, a stretched grin, and then it was gone. I turned off the monitor and pushed back from the desk. I needed a break. As I stood up, the overhead lights flickered, and somewhere in the store, a TV turned on by itself. I didn't want to go back to electronics, but I had to check. As I walked through the empty aisles, the air felt heavier. The TVs in the electronics section were all on now, playing static. That was odd. They were supposed to be off after hours unless someone turned them on manually. I hesitated, then grabbed the remote from the counter and aimed it at the nearest screen. Before I could press the button, the static cleared, and the smiling man was there. Not in front of me, not in the store, on every single TV screen. He was standing in the security office, staring directly at the camera. My chair was still turned where I had left it. My heart pounded. That was impossible. The office was locked. No one could get in without a key. The TVs flickered. The man moved. And now he was closer. I didn't think. I ran. I sprinted back to the security office, my footsteps echoing through the empty store. My hands shook as I grabbed my key and shoved it into the lock. The door swung open. Empty. My chair sat where I had left it. The monitors were on, but the screens were blank. I hesitated, then stepped inside, locking the door behind me. I turned to the monitors, my breath unsteady. I switched the feed back to electronics. The TVs were still on, but the smiling man was gone. I exhaled, trying to calm down. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I had been awake too long. I leaned forward to shut off the monitors. And then I saw it, my reflection in the screen, and behind me, a grin. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. The air was still. But I knew I had seen it. A whisper slid through the room, so soft I almost didn't hear it. Oslo. I froze. No one was here. No one should have known my name. The monitors flickered. One by one, they switched back to the electronics section. The TVs were off now. The only thing on the screen was a single camera feed. The break room. I felt my stomach tighten. I had just come from there. But now the smiling man was there. Sitting at the table. Waiting. I couldn't do this anymore. I had to leave. But I had to see for myself. I stepped out of the office, my hands clammy. The store was too quiet. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against me. I walked toward the break room, my legs stiff. The closer I got, the colder it felt. I reached the door and hesitated. The lights inside flickered. The security camera was still rolling. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Empty. The table was just a table. The chairs were in place. No smiling man. I almost laughed. Maybe I really was losing it. But then I saw it. A single sheet of paper placed neatly on the table, with 2 words written on it. Turn around. I didn't turn around. I bolted out of the break room, running straight for the front of the store. My keys jingled in my pocket as I fumbled to unlock the doors. The moment I stepped outside, everything felt normal again. The streetlights buzzed softly. My car sat in the empty parking lot. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there, catching my breath. I looked back at the store. The lights inside were still on. Through the glass doors, I could see the reflection of the security monitors, and on one of the screens, the smiling man stood at the entrance watching me. I turned the key, started the car, and drove away. I never worked another night shift again. I never liked working the night shift at Target, but the extra pay was worth it. The store closed at midnight, and by 3 a.m. it felt like I was the only person left in the world. The aisles were empty, the registers were silent, and the hum of the freezers in the back was the only sound keeping me company. I was in the stockroom stacking boxes onto a cart. The air was colder here, and the overhead lights buzzed softly. The back of the store had no windows, no natural light, just endless rows of metal shelves filled with products waiting to be stocked. As I bent down to grab another box, I caught movement in the security mirror hanging from the ceiling. I froze. Someone was standing in the shadows at the far end of the stockroom. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. Just stacks of unopened boxes and empty shelves. My heart pounded as I looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there. Tall, thin, motionless. Its face was smooth, empty, like someone had wiped it clean. I swallowed hard and blinked. It was closer now. I stepped back, my hands gripping the edge of the cart. My breathing was too loud in the quiet stockroom. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, its blank face staring at me through the mirror. I turned around again. Nothing. But when I looked down, my stomach tightened. Footprints. They led from the far corner of the stockroom right to where the figure stood in the mirror. But when I looked back, the footprints ended in empty space. I grabbed my radio from my belt and pressed the button. Mike, you there? Mike was the only other person working tonight. He was supposed to be in the front checking inventory. Static. Then a crackle. Yeah, what's up? I glanced back at the mirror. The figure was gone. Can you come to the stockroom for a second? Something wrong? I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? Just something weird back here. On my way. I took slow steps toward where the footprints ended. The cement floor was smooth and dusty, perfect for catching shoe prints. I crouched down and touched one of them. The dust around it was undisturbed, as if whatever made the prints hadn't actually walked, like it had just appeared. Mike arrived a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes. Dude, it's 3 in the morning, what's going on? I pointed to the floor. Tell me you see those. He frowned and stepped closer. See what? I blinked. The footprints were gone. What the hell? I muttered. Mike gave me a look. You okay, man? I glanced up at the security mirror. Nothing there. The stockroom looked normal again. just rows of shelves and boxes. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Forget it. Long shift." Mike shook his head and walked off, muttering something about sleep deprivation. I took a deep breath and grabbed another box. Work. Focus on work. But as I turned back to my cart, my stomach dropped. The boxes I had stacked were gone. Not fallen, not misplaced. Gone. The cart was completely empty, and when I looked back at the mirror, the faceless figure was standing right behind me. I spun around, nearly knocking over the cart. Nothing. My hands trembled as I wiped my forehead. I wasn't imagining this. Something was here. I left the stockroom, walking quickly toward the break room. My footsteps echoed in the empty store. The main floor was even worse. Too open. Too quiet. The security cameras above blinked red, watching everything. I reached the break room and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I poured myself a cup of stale coffee. Maybe I needed caffeine. Maybe I needed to wake up. I pulled out my phone and checked the store's security app. The cameras recorded everything, so if something had been in the stockroom, it would be on tape. I tapped the footage from 10 minutes ago. At first, everything looked normal. Just me, moving boxes. Then the screen flickered. And suddenly, I wasn't alone. The figure stood at the edge of the screen, its head slightly tilted. It was watching me. I fast-forwarded. The figure didn't move. I fast-forwarded again. It was still there. For a full 10 minutes, it stood completely still, watching. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the camera glitched. When the screen came back, I was alone again. A knock at the break room door made me jump. "Jack?" It was Mike. I let out a shaky breath and opened the door. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. I hesitated. I needed to tell someone. "I saw something on the cameras." Mike frowned. "What do you mean?" I handed him my phone. He watched the footage in silence. Then he looked up. "This some kind of prank?" I shook my head. "I swear I didn't edit this." Mike's face paled. "Dude, look at the time." I glanced at the screen. 3:15 a.m. The exact moment the figure disappeared. Mike exhaled. "That's when Daniel saw it too." I stiffened. "Who's Daniel?" Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Guy who used to work here. He quit last year. Said he kept seeing something in the stockroom. A shadow. Always around 3:15 a.m. I swallowed hard. "And?" Mike hesitated. "One night he stayed late. Said he wanted proof. He never told me what happened, but the next morning, he left his uniform on the break room table and walked out. Never came back." A cold breeze touched the back of my neck. Then, clear as day, a whisper brushed against my ear. "Leave." I turned so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. "Did you hear that?" Mike's eyes widened. "Hear what?" I grabbed his arm. "We need to check the cameras again." We ran back to the security office. I pulled up the live feed. The stockroom looked empty. The shelves, the carts, the lights. Everything was normal. Then the screen flickered, and the figure was back. Closer than before. Mike's breath hitched. "What the hell is that?" I tried to rewind, but the screen glitched again. The figure flickered forward, standing just inches from the camera now. Then, slowly, too slowly, its head turned. And even though it had no face, I knew it was looking at me. The screen went black. The next morning, I quit. I didn't tell my boss why. I didn't tell Mike either. I just packed up and walked out. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know why it appeared at 3:15 a.m. But I do know one thing. When I left the store for the last time, I glanced at the security mirror near the exit, and for a split second I saw it, standing in the stockroom, waiting. Working the night shift at Target wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills. Most of the time it was just me, a few other employees, and the quiet hum of the overhead lights. The store closed at 10 p.m., and by 9:45, the last customers were usually gone. That's when the real work started, cleaning up, restocking shelves, and making sure everything was ready for the next day. I didn't mind the silence. In fact, I liked it. The store felt bigger, emptier, like a world of its own. But lately something had been bothering me. Every night while I walked through the aisles, I felt like I was being watched. It wasn't a normal feeling. It was heavy, like something was waiting just around the corner. Then there was aisle 13. The problem? Aisle 13 didn't exist. It wasn't on the store map. It wasn't listed in the inventory. But somehow, every night, I found myself there. It didn't look like the rest of the store. The shelves were too tall, the lights flickered, and the mannequins, they shouldn't have been there at all. But they were. And they weren't standing still. The first time I found aisle 13, I thought I had taken a wrong turn. I was pushing a cart filled with boxes, trying to finish my section before closing. 1 second, I was near home goods, and the next, I was somewhere I didn't recognize. The aisle stretched longer than it should have, disappearing into the distance. The shelves were different. Old, dusty, filled with products I had never seen before. The air smelled strange, like something had been left there too long. Then I noticed the mannequins. They stood at the end of the aisle, facing each other like they were frozen mid-conversation. Their plastic skin was cracked, their glassy eyes staring into nothing. I shivered. We didn't keep mannequins in this part of the store. I turned to leave, but the aisle wasn't the same. The entrance was gone. Instead, there were more shelves, more mannequins, and the lights above me flickered, casting long shadows that moved when they shouldn't have. A whisper ran through the air. "You're not supposed to be here." I spun around, heart racing. No one was there, but the mannequins had moved. My breath caught in my throat. The mannequins that had been standing at the end of the aisle were closer now. They hadn't fallen. They hadn't been pushed. They had moved. I took a step back. My hands felt clammy. I needed to get out of there. I turned and walked quickly toward where the entrance should have been. The shelves felt tighter now, the space closing in. I pushed forward, trying not to panic. The whisper came again. "You're not supposed to be here." It was closer this time, right behind me. I broke into a run. My shoes squeaked against the floor as I darted between the shelves, searching for the exit. The mannequins were everywhere now, their arms reaching out, their faces blank. Then the lights flickered again, and the store changed. The aisles around me twisted, shifting like a maze. I ran faster, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The shelves blurred past me, and then I was standing in the middle of the main store. No extra aisles, no mannequins, just the normal, empty store. I turned in circles, trying to understand what had just happened. I was back, but I knew what I had seen. Aisle 13 was real, and it didn't want me to leave. I told myself I wouldn't go back. But the next night, it happened again. I was restocking near the frozen section when I noticed the layout didn't look right. The aisles stretched longer than usual. The signs were missing. And at the far end, aisle 13, I wanted to turn around. I wanted to leave, but my feet moved forward. The shelves were taller than before, their edges sharp and rusted. The mannequins were waiting. Their arms were bent at strange angles, their heads tilted too far. A whisper slid through the air. "Stay." I gritted my teeth. "Who are you?" The lights flickered. The mannequins twitched. I took a step back, my pulse hammering. Then I ran. The shelves twisted, but I pushed forward. The whisper grew louder. "You're not supposed to be here." I burst into the main store again. The aisle was gone. But this time something was different. The mannequins weren't just in aisle 13 anymore. They were in the main store too. Watching. I told my manager Lisa about it the next morning. She sighed, rubbing her temples. You shouldn't have gone back. My stomach dropped. You know about it? Lisa nodded. Aisle 13 isn't supposed to exist, but sometimes it does. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Years ago, before this place was a Target, there was another store here, a department store. One night, a worker got lost during closing. They never found him. I swallowed. And the mannequins? Lisa's eyes darkened. He worked in the mannequin department. A heavy silence settled between us. Then she said something that made my blood turn cold. Noah, whatever you do, never stop moving when you're in there. I didn't want to go back, but I had to know. That night I waited. I stayed near the registers watching the store. 9:45 p.m. aisle 13 appeared. I took a deep breath and walked forward. The shelves loomed over me. The mannequins were closer than before, their hands reaching. The whisper came again, louder this time. You're not supposed to be here. I kept moving. I didn't stop. The mannequins twitched, their heads turning to follow me. Then I saw something new. At the very end of the aisle, past the shelves, past the mannequins, a door. It was cracked open, light spilling out. I ran toward it. The whisper turned into a scream. The shelves closed in. The mannequins lunged. I reached the door, and everything went black. I woke up in the break room. Lisa was standing over me, shaking my shoulder. Noah, wake up! I gasped for air, my body drenched in sweat. The door! I saw a door! Lisa's face went pale. No one has ever seen the door before, she whispered. I sat up, my hands still shaking. The store was normal again. The aisles were in place. The mannequins were gone. But when I looked down at my hands, there was dust on my fingertips, dust from a door I had touched. And somewhere in the distance, deep inside the store, the whisper came one last time. You're not supposed to be here.